It was around 3 a.m. when the faint, rhythmic pinging sound pulled me from sleep. My bedroom was cloaked in darkness, save for the faint glow of my laptop screen across the room. The noise was coming from it, a quiet, persistent ping that sent a cold shiver down my spine. I didn't remember leaving it on. Rubbing my eyes, I hesitated before crossing the room, a heavy sense of unease already building in my chest. The screen displayed an unfamiliar window, a chat box. I froze when I saw the message. "You left something behind." My stomach twisted. The username was a string of random numbers and letters, nothing recognizable. The cursor in the chat box blinked, waiting. My heart pounded as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. It all came rushing back, the restless curiosity that had gripped me the night before. I'd been reading a thread about the dark web, specifically about bizarre marketplaces and live streams buried deep within it. For some reason, I couldn't shake the idea of checking it out myself. I wasn't new to the internet's darker corners. I'd browsed shady forums before, always careful to use a VPN and other basic precautions, but this was different. The thread I'd found claimed there were experiences hidden on the dark web, interactive shows that blurred the line between reality and performance. It sounded ridiculous at the time. The site I found was difficult to access. It loaded slowly, pages timing out or redirecting without warning. The frustration had mounted, and I started clicking links at random, just hoping to find something interesting before giving up. Eventually, I landed on a page with a black background and a single line of text. "Welcome. For personalized access, please fill in the fields below." There were blanks for a username, age, and access phrase. It seemed fake, just another generic landing page. But something about the phrasing intrigued me. On a whim, I typed in a throwaway username, made up an age, and entered a phrase I'd seen in one of the threads. "Curiosity opens doors." The page flickered. A loading icon appeared, followed by a new screen with rows of links, cryptic labels like live feeds 01, market listings, and exclusive experiences. I hadn't explored much before the lagging connection, and my growing exhaustion got the better of me. I shut my laptop and went to bed thinking nothing of it. But now, seeing this chat window, I realized I must have left the browser open. And apparently, someone had been watching. I hovered my hand over the trackpad, unsure if I should respond. Another message appeared before I could decide. "Did you enjoy the preview?" My throat went dry. It wasn't just an automated message, someone was actively typing. My mind raced as I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of bot designed to reel in visitors, like those fake customer service chats on sketchy websites. Before I could convince myself to close the laptop, another message popped up. "I see you're hesitant. Don't worry, we'll guide you." The word we sent a chill through me. My paranoia kicked in as I scanned the room, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. I reminded myself that my camera had been taped over for years. There was no way they could actually see me, right? I finally mustered the courage to type back. My fingers shook as I wrote, "What do you mean? Who is this?" The reply was immediate. "You left something behind. Come back and you'll find it." Something about the phrasing unnerved me, as though they were implying I'd already agreed to something. My mouse moved to the corner of the screen, ready to close the browser, but before I could click, a new message appeared. "You can't leave yet." The word sent my heart racing. Suddenly, I remembered the vague form I'd filled out on the site. Could that have given them access to my information? I hadn't used my real name or any identifying details, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a grave mistake. I slammed the laptop shut, breathing hard. My room felt suffocating now, every shadow a potential threat. I told myself I was overreacting, that it was just a coincidence or an elaborate prank, but deep down, I knew I'd crossed a line. Something was watching me from the other side of that screen, and it wasn't about to let me go. The morning after that unsettling chat message, I convinced myself it had all been a bad dream. I woke up to sunlight streaming through my curtains, and the familiar sounds of the neighborhood outside made the night's events feel distant, almost surreal. Still, a knot of unease lingered in my chest. To reassure myself, I opened my laptop and scanned through the browser history. The dark web tabs were gone, likely closed when I slammed the lid shut. My inbox was quiet, and everything seemed normal. I breathed a little easier, chalking it all up to paranoia and sleep-deprived imagination. But as the hours passed, curiosity gnawed at me. The message, "You left something behind," replayed in my mind, like an itch I couldn't scratch. Against my better judgment, I decided to revisit the site. This time, I was determined to stay in control. Reconnecting to the dark web wasn't difficult. I'd already configured my VPN and Tor browser the night before. The same black and grey homepage loaded after a few minutes, complete with its cryptic links. I clicked through cautiously, this time taking notes of the usernames in the chat rooms and the kinds of listings on the market pages. At first, it was all nonsensical or innocuous. Encrypted chat rooms filled with idle chatter about cryptocurrency, forums discussing bizarre conspiracy theories, and listings for products like encrypted hard drives or untraceable IDs. Most of it looked like cheap scams or overly dramatic attempts to sound edgy. But then, I stumbled across something different, a chat room labeled "Observers Only." It stood out because there were no instructions, no obvious purpose. Just a list of active users with randomized strings of numbers for names. My heart raced as I clicked in. The chat room was silent at first. No messages, no moderator introductions, nothing. Just a blank feed that felt like staring into a void. Then a single message appeared: "Curiosity is dangerous." I froze. It could have been directed at anyone, but the timing felt too specific. Another message followed: "You should leave before it's too late." I sat back, heart pounding. Was this a warning, or just someone trolling? My pulse quickened as I typed a response. "Who are you?" "What do you mean?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if in response, the usernames in the chat room began to disappear one by one until only mine remained. Suddenly, my laptop's webcam light flickered on. I stared in disbelief. I hadn't touched the settings, hadn't even thought about the camera. My mind raced for explanations. Maybe it was a glitch, maybe... Before I could react, a message appeared in the chat. "I see you." The words felt like a punch to the gut. My stomach churned as I scrambled to close the browser. The light on the webcam stayed on for another agonizing second before shutting off. My hands trembled as I ripped a piece of tape off a nearby notebook and covered the camera lens. I sat in stunned silence, staring at the now blank screen. Every rational thought in my mind told me it was just a coincidence, a trick of some kind. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been seen, truly seen. The next day, I tried to move on. I deleted the browser, cleared my history, and reset my passwords. I even told myself I'd overreacted. Maybe the chat room wasn't real, and the webcam incident was some freak software issue. I tried to push it all to the back of my mind. But the dark web wasn't finished with me. It started with an email, one that arrived in my inbox late that evening. The sender's address was gibberish, random characters and symbols that meant nothing. My fingers hovered over the delete button, but something compelled me to open it. Inside were two attachments. The first was a blurry screenshot of me sitting at my desk from the night before. I was staring at my laptop, wide-eyed, frozen in fear. The second was a copy of my driver's license. Panic washed over me as I read the short message that accompanied the files. "You don't belong here, but now you're part of it." My throat felt tight. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My immediate reaction was to unplug everything, my laptop, my router, even my phone. The thought that someone had accessed such personal information left me feeling violated, exposed. How had they gotten it? My laptop was supposedly secure, my data encrypted. I didn't use my real name or credentials on the site, just a throwaway username and VPN, and yet there it was, evidence that someone had breached my life in ways I couldn't understand. Warning signs. Ignored against every ounce of common sense, I found myself back at my desk later that night, trying to make sense of it all. The fear was outweighed by my need to know what was happening. I reconnected to the dark web, this time using a fresh installation of the browser. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, answers maybe, or some explanation for how they'd found me. Part of me hoped I'd imagined the email altogether. When I logged back into the same site, my previous chat history was gone. The usernames I'd seen before were different now, a new string of random alphanumeric codes. But there was one new message waiting for me in a private inbox I hadn't noticed before. The first was a blurry screenshot of me sitting at my desk from the night before. I was staring at my laptop, wide-eyed, frozen in fear. The second was a copy of my driver's license. Panic washed over me as I read the short message that accompanied the files. "You don't belong here, but now you're part of it." My throat felt tight. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My immediate reaction was to unplug everything, my laptop, my router, even my phone. The thought that someone had accessed such personal information left me feeling violated, exposed. How had they gotten it? My laptop was supposedly secure, my data encrypted. I didn't use my real name or credentials on the site, just a throwaway username and VPN. And yet, there it was. Evidence that someone had breached my life in ways I couldn't understand. Warning signs. Ignored against every ounce of common sense, I found myself back at my desk later that night, trying to make sense of it all. The fear was outweighed by my need to know what was happening. I reconnected to the dark web, this time using a fresh installation of the browser. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, answers maybe, or some explanation for how they'd found me. Part of me hoped I'd imagined the email altogether. When I logged back into the same site, my previous chat history was gone. The usernames I'd seen before were different now, a new string of random alphanumeric codes. But there was one new message waiting for me in a private inbox I hadn't noticed before. It read, "Don't come back." My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. Every instinct told me to listen this time, to log off and never look back. But the same compulsion that had drawn me here in the first place wouldn't let go. I typed back, desperate for clarity. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The response came almost instantly. "You don't want to know. Leave now, or we'll make you." The room felt suffocating as I shut the laptop and pushed it away. My heart was hammering in my chest and every muscle in my body screamed at me to run. But where could I go? If they had my driver's license, they already knew everything about me. I spent the rest of the night pacing the house, double-checking the locks on my doors and windows. The reality of what I'd done, of the doors I'd opened, began to sink in. Whoever these people were, they weren't bluffing. And I was about to find out just how far they were willing to go. The first thing I did was delete the email, hoping that by erasing it I could erase the sheer terror it had brought into my life. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe it was a sick prank, someone pulling information from an old data breach. I convinced myself it couldn't be as bad as it seemed. I spent hours resetting every password for every account I owned. Social media, bank accounts, even my streaming services, anything that could be linked back to me. I combed through my laptop for signs of malware, running scans until my fingers were numb from typing. By the time I was done, the sun had risen, but the unease hadn't faded. That day passed in a haze of vigilance. Every ping from my phone, every creak in the house made me jump. I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts kept returning to that email, to the shadowy figures lurking behind my screen. The next evening, as I was starting to feel some semblance of calm, my inbox pinged again. My blood ran cold as I saw another message from the same untraceable address. This one was worse. The email contained a video. My heart hammered as I clicked on it, my mind screaming at me to stop, but my curiosity winning out. The screen filled with grainy black and white footage. It was from a security camera aimed at my front porch. The timestamp showed it had been recorded just an hour earlier. In the video, a dark figure stood at my door, their face obscured by a hood. They didn't knock, didn't try to enter. They just stood there, motionless, as if waiting. After a few minutes, they turned toward the camera, their head tilting slightly as if they knew I'd be watching. Then the video cut to black. Below the video was a single line of text. "You can't ignore us." I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse roaring in my ears. Whoever this was, they weren't just some anonymous troll. They knew where I lived. They were watching me. Panic overtook me. I called the police, but when they arrived, there was nothing to find. No one outside, no signs of a break-in, and no clues as to who had sent the email. The officers gave me the usual advice about staying vigilant and keeping my doors locked, but their skepticism was clear. To them, I was just another paranoid internet user with an overactive imagination. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like a threat, every shadow on the walls a potential intruder. When the morning came, I made a trip to the hardware store, buying blackout curtains and a new set of locks for my doors. I even installed a cheap security system, hoping the blinking red lights would be enough to scare off whoever was tormenting me. But the emails didn't stop. The next one came 2 days later. This time it was a simple message: cooperate or face the consequences. I stared at the screen, trying to decipher the cryptic threat. Cooperate with what? They hadn't asked me for anything, not money, not information, just vague warnings and ominous videos. My hands shook as I typed out a reply. "What do you want from me?" The response came almost immediately. "You'll see." Days turned into weeks, and the tension only grew. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, scanning for anything out of place. I noticed unfamiliar cars parked on my street, lingering for hours before disappearing without a trace. On multiple occasions, I thought I saw figures in my peripheral vision, shadows that vanished the moment I turned my head. I stopped leaving the house except for essential errands, and even then I felt like I was being followed. Every time I turned around, I half expected to see that hooded figure from the video, standing silently, waiting for me to notice them. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every night, I lay awake, listening for sounds that didn't belong. My laptop stayed off, its webcam taped over with thick layers of duct tape. But it didn't matter. No matter how much I tried to shut them out, they always found a way in. One night, out of sheer desperation, I reached out to a friend who was a cybersecurity expert. I told him everything, leaving out just enough details to avoid sounding completely insane. He agreed to help, coming over the next day with a toolkit of software and devices to scan for breaches. He spent hours combing through my laptop, router and phone, but in the end, he came up empty-handed. "Everything looks clean," he said, his brow furrowed. "Whoever's doing this is either incredibly good, or they're messing with you in ways I can't track." His words offered no comfort. The final straw came with the next email. It was a link to a private video with no subject line or text in the body. Against my better judgment, I clicked on it, my hands trembling as the video loaded. The footage was from inside a room. At first glance, it seemed generic, a small, dimly lit bedroom with a desk, chair, and bed. But as the camera panned around, my breath caught in my throat. It was my room. The details were identical, from the pattern on the bedspread to the stack of books I'd left on the nightstand. But there was one difference. Sitting at the desk was a mannequin. The mannequin was dressed in clothes identical to what I'd been wearing the night before. Its head was tilted slightly, as if staring at the camera, and its hands rested on a laptop that looked just like mine. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the screen, frozen with terror. I felt a primal fear I couldn't describe, like the world had shifted beneath my feet. This wasn't just someone watching me, it was someone studying me, recreating my life down to the smallest detail. The message that accompanied the video was the most chilling of all. You're not in control anymore. I didn't know what to do. Reporting it to the authorities felt pointless. They hadn't helped before, and I had no proof that any of this was real. But doing nothing felt like surrendering to whatever game these people were playing. The only thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't trust my own space anymore. Every corner of my home felt compromised, every shadow hiding an unseen threat. I knew I had to find a way to fight back or to escape before it was too late. The email hit my inbox late at night, as usual, short and chilling. Join us. Tonight, 2 a.m. We'll be watching. Below the text was a single link. My stomach twisted. This was it. Whatever game they'd been playing, it had come to this. I stared at the screen, my head buzzing with 1,000 thoughts. I didn't want to click it, but deep down, I knew they weren't going to let me ignore them. I clicked the link. It loaded a black screen with a countdown ticking away in bold numbers, just over an hour to go. Below it were simple instructions. Keep your camera on. Do not leave your seat. Failure to comply will result in termination. Termination. The word sent a shiver through me. Did they mean me? My life? My privacy? I couldn't tell anymore. With shaky hands, I peeled the duct tape off my webcam and adjusted it to face me. The red light blinked on and I leaned back in my chair, waiting as the timer ticked down. When it hit 0, the screen changed. A live stream window opened, but at first it was just darkness. Then usernames began appearing in the chat, random strings of letters and numbers I'd seen before. My stomach dropped. These weren't just viewers. These were the people who had been watching me for weeks. The screen flickered, and a figure stepped into view, their face hidden behind a blank white mask. Their voice was distorted, neither male nor female. "Welcome," they said. "Tonight, you'll play a game." The chat lit up instantly. Finally. It's starting. The excitement made my skin crawl. The masked figure gestured to a table on the screen where a knife, a black envelope, and a smartphone sat neatly arranged. "Your first task is simple," they said, motioning to the envelope. "Open it." I hesitated, my pulse pounding in my ears. The chat was relentless. "Do it. Hurry up." Swallowing hard, I reached forward and tore the envelope open. Inside was a piece of paper with my name and address written on it. I froze. My address. My life. They weren't just watching me. They knew everything about me. The figure tilted their head, as if studying me. "You see, you were chosen," they said. "This isn't a mistake." I felt sick. The first task was disturbing, but manageable. Take the knife and make a small cut on my arm. A commitment to the game, they called it. The chat exploded. "Do it! Prove yourself." My hands shook as I picked up the blade. The steel felt cold against my skin as I pressed it down and drew a shallow line. Blood beaded up immediately, and I held my arm to the camera. The chat erupted in applause. "Good," the figure said. "Now take the phone." The next task was weirder. They told me to record myself repeating phrases they dictated, cryptic sentences that made no sense but felt ominous. I repeated the words. "The door is open. Curiosity is a path. I am ready." My voice shook, but I obeyed. Then they made me call a number they provided and repeat the phrases over the phone. It rang twice before going dead. I had no idea who I'd called, but the figure seemed pleased. "You've done well," they said. "But there's one more thing." The screen changed again, this time showing a live feed of a room. At first it looked generic, just a small bedroom, but as the camera panned around, I realized it wasn't just any room. It was my room. The details were perfect. The bedspread, the books on my nightstand, even the crooked frame on the wall. But there was one difference. Sitting at the desk wasn't me. It was a mannequin dressed in my clothes. The chat went wild. "This is amazing. The detail is insane." The masked figure spoke again. "This is what you've given us. Your life, your habits, your secrets. We've been watching for a long time, and now you're the show." My chest tightened as the realization hit me. Every moment of my life had been broadcast to these people. My privacy, my routines, my very identity. They'd turned it all into their entertainment. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I was trapped, a pawn in their twisted game. "One last task," the figure said. The screen split into two options: save yourself and save another. The figure explained, "I could choose to end this nightmare by clicking save yourself, or I could save someone else, though they didn't explain who, at my own expense." The chat was chaos. Some were rooting for me to save myself. Others begged me to choose the other option. I stared at the buttons, my mind racing. What did they mean by save another? Who would I be helping? Was it someone like me, another victim, or just part of their sick joke? The timer began ticking down. 5 o'clock, 4:59, 4:58. Sweat poured down my face as I tried to make sense of it all. Choosing either option felt like walking into a trap, but letting the timer run out might have been worse. With just seconds left, I made my choice. The screen went black. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then a final message appeared. "Welcome to the game." I sat there, staring at the words, realizing with a sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. The breaking point came during the final task. They wanted me to do something I couldn't bring myself to do, something that crossed a line I hadn't even known I had. I can't bring myself to say exactly what it was, but it wasn't just invasive. It was cruel. For the first time, I refused. I slammed the laptop shut, ripping out the power cord and pulling it from the desk. My chest heaved as I stumbled back, the room spinning with a mix of fear and adrenaline. The red webcam light flickered off, and for a moment, I felt relief. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, almost polite, but it quickly grew louder, more insistent. I froze, my pulse roaring in my ears. No one should have been at my door this late. My heart hammered as I grabbed my phone, thinking to call the police. But before I could dial, my laptop screen lit up again. The display was on, despite being unplugged. A message glowed against the black background. "You can't leave now." I felt like the walls were closing in. The knocking stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. I edged toward the window, peeking through the blinds. The street outside was empty, the neighborhood eerily still. No cars, no footsteps, just me and the growing sense that I was trapped. I tried to think logically. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone had hacked my laptop and was messing with me. But the thought didn't help. It didn't explain the relentless knocking or the feeling that someone was just beyond my line of sight. Finally, I dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm voice was a lifeline, and I stammered out everything: the emails, the live stream, the masked figure, even the knock at my door. I didn't care how insane it sounded. I just needed someone to come. When the officers arrived, they found nothing. No one was outside, no signs of forced entry, no footprints leading to my door. They walked through the house, shining flashlights into every corner, but everything was normal, or at least it looked that way. I showed them the emails and the video links, trying to explain what had happened, but when I opened my inbox, everything was gone. The screenshots, the threats, the live stream, it had all vanished. The officers exchanged a look, one that made me feel small and crazy all at once. They told me it was probably a scam or someone trying to scare me, and then they left. I sat in the silence of my living room, staring at my laptop. The screen was blank now, as if none of it had ever happened. But I knew better. For weeks, I tried to move on. I deleted everything from my laptop and bought a new one, just in case. I avoided the dark web, stayed off social media, and kept my curtains drawn at all times. But no matter how hard I tried to forget, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It started small. Items moving around the house, things being slightly out of place. A pen on my desk that I didn't remember putting there, a door slightly ajar when I was certain I'd closed it. I told myself it was paranoia, my mind playing tricks on me after everything I'd been through. But then there were the whispers. At night, just as I was drifting off to sleep, I'd hear faint voices, too soft to make out words, but always there. I'd bolt upright, heart racing, only to find my room empty. Some nights I'd wake up to the sound of typing, only to find my laptop closed and unplugged. The worst was the feeling of being watched. I'd be sitting in my living room, reading or watching TV, and I'd feel it, a weight in the air, an unseen presence lingering just behind me. I'd turn around, expecting to find someone standing there, but I never did. Months have passed since that night, but the fear hasn't gone away. I've changed my routines, moved furniture to block the windows, even moved to a new apartment. But it doesn't matter. The feeling followed me. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just imagining it. Maybe the trauma of what happened on the dark web messed with my head, making me see and hear things that aren't there. But deep down, I know the truth. They're still watching. I don't know how, and I don't know why, but once you step into the dark web, it never truly lets you go. You can close the tabs, unplug the devices, and even walk away, but they'll always find a way back in. So if you've ever thought about exploring the dark web, consider this your warning. It's not worth it. Curiosity isn't just dangerous, it's a door you can never fully close, and once it's open, you're never really alone.